What's the worst thing someone has ever done to you? Story 1. My parents divorced when I was 7. My father had an affair. My father remarried and got a new family. My mother remained single and bitter. She still loved him. They always used to argue about whose turn it was to have me. They were trying to spite each other, but the only thing that actually happened was that I realized neither of them must have loved me. One Christmas Eve when I was 14, they were having the same argument. My dad and his new family were staying in a hotel and told my mom they hadn't booked a room for me. I walked to my mom's and she said it was my dad's turn to have me and locked me out. I slept in a car park fire hose. It didn't actually have a fire hose in it. I was so fucking scared and cold. Skinny kid. I knew I couldn't ask my friends to stay because it was Christmas Eve and already close to midnight by this point. I started to cry when the snow started falling at about 3 a.m. I wish I had known back then that I could have just called the police, but my juvenile brain didn't know that. I went to live in a children's home shortly after that, and honestly, I loved it. I still think of my key worker as my dad. He was great. In response to some questions. I'm 35 now. I'm a female. My mother actually lives with me in my house now. I'm a very forgiving person. She became an alcoholic after my father left, so I blame him more. I know that's bad. She was an awful mother, but she was a product of her own upbringing. I wasn't so forgiving with my father because he replaced me. He tore me out of the children's home when I was 15 because he was embarrassed. His daughter lived in a children's home. He did up homes for a living, like he went from living into a 1-bed apartment to a 5-bed townhouse because he could afford that now. He put me in a Harry Potter room. It was a 5-bedroom, and my step-siblings had massive rooms, despite me being older than them. Like if you walked into my room, it had a glass door, no privacy. You would bump your head. I left and went to live in a hostel. When I was a certain age, can't remember, my father bought my mother out of my 3-bed childhood home. She bought a 1-bed flat. I was like, okay, guess I'm not welcome. I phoned up social services and put myself into care. Story 2. When I was little, my dad smiled every time before he beat me, so now I flinch every time someone smiles. People always look at me weird when I look scared at them being happy. I hate it. I really do. Story 3. Freshman year of college. I met a girl and we became best friends. We did everything together. Then one day in class, she told me she didn't want to talk. She wanted to read. That was fine, of course. She did that 2 more days. The 4th day, she moved her seat from next to me to across the room. I tried to get her attention to talk, but she avoided me. Next week, we both happened to be washing our hands in the bathroom together. I said hi. She acted like I never existed. Soon she left the college. I went to grad school 3 years later, somewhere 2 HRs away, and lo and behold, she was in my class. We were assigned the same group for a project. She looked uncomfortable, and the next time class met, I found that she had dropped it. I never saw her again. It hurt me deeply because I had no clue why she did this. We didn't fight. I'm not manipulative or catty or anything. This wasn't the worst thing to happen, but it definitely ranked up there. Story 4. My ex-wife made me believe I was making up all the proof that she was having an affair. For a couple years. I went through therapy and anger management, accepted that I was just a fucked up person and should have never disrespected my loving wife by accusing her of such things. She pushed all the help on me, praised me, etc. 2 weeks after we divorced, she cheated on the guy she was dating, another affair dude, with me and admitted to everything. I kicked her out my house immediately. Story 5 was early high school. Joking around with my father, horrid temper, switch flipped with him. He chased me down the hallway, thought we even playing till he pinned me down, hand around my throat strangling me till I passed out. Burst blood vessels in my eyes. Had to wear sunglasses for a good week to hide them while at work or elsewhere. Story 6. Well, my ex dropped the fact she was late and might be pregnant, and then admitted it was either for me or her 2-year-old's father. After sitting down and really thinking about it, it turns out I was the other guy, not vice versa. Long story short, she wasn't pregnant, and I noped the out of there. Story 7. A girl I was getting engaged to decided to start cheating. Then, when that wasn't enough, she thought killing me by driving our car into a light pole on the highway would be better than her family finding out what she was really about. Story 8. My mother gave away the dog that I had solely taken care of for years, and then the aunt that she gave it away to gave him to a random person. They stole my dog, the best animal I've ever had. She has a history of being terrible to dogs. Loved you, Jock. I hope you're still alive and they didn't lie about that too. Story 9. My stepdad stole 2 houses, 2 cars, a scooter, and a boat from us when my mother died. He then proceeded to commit perjury and tell the judge that he was broke because he paid me and my sister 60 euros or zero each. This got him out of a loan that he had from my aunt, who loaned my mother hundreds of thousands of euros so she could buy a house. Basically, he did so much acrobatics that I didn't even get my own bed or clothes back, and he ended up with everything that could remotely be stamped as my mother's property. Overall, the worth of everything he stole, not just from my side of the family, but his ex-wife that he got back to later, is upwards of $500,000. His wife then also dies, and he takes whatever's left. My lawyer told me I couldn't do anything since now 2 wives of his died in a 3-year span, and there was no way a judge would look at him and say he owes anyone anything. Honestly, I think he married my mom and then killed her. The same with his then ex but current after wife, who also died rather quickly. Story 10. Show me a video of my best friend and him having, when it was totally uncalled or asked for. I was seeing this guy. Other shitty things have happened to me, but from a friend standpoint, that one was really shitty. Story 11. The girl I had a crush on when I was 8 only pretended to be my friend because she wanted to get embarrassing secrets out of me. She then spread them around and became one of the popular girls, and I was horrendously bullied for years to come. Worst thing is, we had after-school English in middle school together again, and she was like, "Hey, why do you not talk to me?" etc. They made a solid quarter of my life and just forgot about it. I'm scarred for life and she will never remember it, let alone feel bad about it. Story 12. Where to start? My mother died within 4 hours of going into hospice around 7 p.m. I was notified the next morning she had passed by my brother, who I was not talking to previously. He let me know she went into a coma within a few minutes of arriving in her room. Aunt is notified the night before, though. She arrives about 6 hours later on a red-eye, and my mother had passed already. Aunt calls me about 3 months later and asks me, "Your mother was calling for you when she was dying. She kept asking why you weren't there for her. How do you feel about that?" My aunt kept pressing me as I sat there in silence wondering, WTF kind of conversation am I having? And what is the truth? I hung up and called my brother asking him the truth and flipped out when I told him what my aunt had said. Seriously, who does this? Burnin' bitch. Story 13. My mother was malignant narcissist. She psychologically abused and beat me down so low that I never lived up to my full potential. I know it's cliché, supposed to be wrong to blame your parents after you're grown. And I've worked hard to get farther along in life than most people do, but I know I could have been so much more if she hadn't been the sick person that she was. Today, I'm 72 and still moving forward and upward. I have 2 nice homes, my own business, and friends. But in the years it took to heal myself, time was not on my side. I could have had the career I wanted if I had not listened to her when I was young. I could have had a home and family had I not been warped. These are things you have to start young at. And I can't grin back time. I blame myself enough. But I still congratulate myself too. I've managed to bring myself to a place where I'm happy and secure. I have a good life now. Story 14. One time, I went to a concert with a female friend that I had a massive crush on. At the end of the concert, she ditched me to hook up with some dude she met at the show. The thing is, we were sharing a hotel room because we were out of town, and that's where they went to fool around. So, I walked around the city of Baltimore in the pouring rain at 2 o'clock in the morning while she's fucking a rando bro in our hotel room. Here's the real kicker. It was my birthday. Story 15. My dad used to beat me and my sister with belts, hangers, brushes, and not just a pop on the butt. He'd hit us as hard as he could repeatedly until our legs and butt were black and blue, and I remember hearing my sister's screams and cries for him to stop in the next room. My sister used to take off running to her bedroom whenever my dad would come home. My dad beat her for running to her room whenever he noticed the empty recliner in the living room rocking back and forth, meaning she leapt out of it fast to avoid him. Now, whenever someone pulls off their belt, I immediately back away. My ex one time was just packing his bag for a trip and had a belt in his hand, and I responded in that way. Story 16. An ex of mine broke all of my, at the time, recently deceased mom's things because I loved her more than I loved him. We'd only been dating a few months. Story 17. My ex cheated on me, and she knew I would come home early that day, so when I walked into the house, I caught them in the act. And she acted like it was my fault. Story 18. I used to practice law. A team of partners for whom I worked teamed up against me in retaliation for my refusing to sleep with one of them, who was married with 2 kids. They ruined my career and mental health. 2 weeks after leaving that job, I had 3 stress-related grand mal seizures and landed in the ICU. Story 19 dated a woman for a time and eventually got involved with her teen kids and acted in a step-parent role for years. Invested tons of my time, energy, and resources into them as a family. Then my GF went into a spell of depression and didn't want to do anything or talk about anything. Life went on around her. Then when she saw me spending time with the kids instead of sitting on the couch doing and saying nothing like her, she became pathologically jealous and started accusing me of having too much interest in young girls. I spent a long time trying to fix and salvage the situation, as I felt we were all bonded together as a family. Paid out of pocket for counseling for us, and for her exclusively for a long time, after the therapist determined the locus of the problem was not me. She never accepted responsibility for her claim and the effects it had, thought she could just casually dismiss it at will, like she'd claimed I left the toilet seat up one time, thought I was making a big deal out of everything. She never spent a second addressing the childhood traumas that openly affected her whenever there was a pinch, even invoking them as an excuse for acting how she did. Then pretending they were fixed or non-existent the 99% of the time she did not need to use them to manipulate the situation at hand. Finally had to walk away from the situation. Started dating someone else, who was a college debate coach with a PhD in English, night and day communication and interaction styles. And she acted like I abandoned her, even cheated, when I made good on my promise to leave without effort on her part. Now a long time later, I still hear from one of the boys who is now in his 30s and just had a baby. At least 2 of my ex's grown children don't even talk to her at this point. I never tried to assemble a family again, but have had a very fulfilling love life since. Story 20. It was on accident, but my friend cut the tip of my finger off with scissors. It felt so bad, and I have a huge scar. At the time when it happened, we just stood there, as blood was all over the floor and the tip of my finger laid on the blade. I popped my finger in my mouth and ran to the office. It looked like a brain was pushing itself out of my finger, all veins exposed and everything. Story 21. In 6th grade, I was running down some stairs with stuff in my hands. I had 3-4 steps left when a 2-year-older guy hit me in the back of my head with a table tennis racket. I flew down face first into the concrete floor, 22 years later still in pain every day from this. Story 22. Cheated on me with a girl who was mentally disabled and lived in a group home. I doubt she was legally able to give consent. Did wonders for my self-esteem. Story 23. Had a real piece of stepmom when I was 12. My dad married her because he was busy and needed someone to care for my younger brother and I. She loved him but abused the out of me. She would push me down the stairs and call me fat. That started the long road of developing a terrible eating disorder that consumed my life until the last couple years. I'm in recovery and doing well. But as a little kid without ever having my birth mother around, I still loved her endlessly. My only escape really was video games. I would often spend hours at the computer playing random little games I found online. I remember this so clearly and it hurt for a long time to think about. One day, she decided she didn't want to live with us and just straight up abandoned us. After she left, I went to go play some games at the computer and found a little nearly folded up note. It was a note she left about how much she hated me specifically. She was leaving because she didn't like me or want to be around me. Anyway, yeah, I had a very traumatic childhood. You Missy, hope you're doing terrible in life. Story 24. People's stories are far worse than mine, but I suppose everyone's are terrible to the person dealing with it. My dad left when I was 15 months old. I'm 30 years old tomorrow, and there has not been a day I don't think of him and wonder why I wasn't good enough. Every big birthday I had, I thought this may be the year he makes contact. Always feel stupid. I told myself at my 21st birthday I wouldn't do it anymore, wouldn't think about it. But here I am, 30 tomorrow, still hoping I get that card in the post. Or he turns up at my door. Tried every avenue to find him over the last few years, but he made a good job of making it impossible. It's affected all aspects of my life in ways I never realized until recently. If I make it to a day and I have my own child, I hope I will be good enough to become a father, as I honestly have no idea what it means or how to be one. Spend most my days thinking of ending this. Story 25. Girlfriend said she didn't want kids and was on birth control. She got pregnant and dumped me. Turns out she was never on birth control. I also found out from her ex-boyfriend before me that she did want kids, and the reason they broke up was because he didn't want kids. She lied to get pregnant. I thought I knew her. I have major trust issues now. It's hard for me to think people won't completely be over now, or for me to think they are not evil somewhere inside them. Story 26. Not exactly the worst, but I had a close friend that, in the space of a week, decided I was the Antichrist. Told our neighbors I had been stalking her. Contacted my employer to say the same thing. I had a job as assistant superintendent. Spread a lot of gossip and slander. Mind you, none of that stuck to me because people knew it was BS. A few months later, I found a bin of stuff she had been storing in my condo, decorating supplies, etc. So, I dropped it at her door while she was out, with a note saying what it was and that there wouldn't be any other contact. A few days later, I have the police at my door, because dropping off her stuff was harassing and stalking her. Explained my side, showed the nice policewoman all the emails I had saved showing that, yes, we had been friends. No, it wasn't stalking. Ended up with her getting a warning for misuse of 911. Story 27. I was in a relationship with a girl we'll just call Jen. Jen and I had been together for nearly 2 years, but at one point I noticed she was acting differently. I asked if she was all right and if I could do anything to help her feel better. She kept pretending that everything was fine for a while. After about a month of this, she told me she wanted us to separate. She wouldn't give me a definitive reason as to why that was, only saying, "It's not you." Well, the following day I got the insight that I needed. Jen posted on Facebook about how happy she was with the man she'd been cheating on me with for over a month, as if she was proud of being a cheater. At that moment, I cut all communication with her. I blocked her phone number, blocked her on social media, and pretended like she never existed. Story 28. When I was gone to my nephew's funeral, which was traumatic, my landlord got mad at me and entered my apt and grabbed my 18-year-old cat and put her in the Humane Society. I came back from my long trip to my cat being gone. Plus, it was late, so I couldn't go pick her up. Still makes me pissed and unbelieving to this day. Story 29. Probably the last 2 years of my life with my ex. Mentally and physically abusive. Arguing daily about the smallest things. Constant weekly screaming matches. Bi-monthly physical fights that I just took. Until I finally defended myself, he wound up getting 3 stitches and I got arrested. I'm so glad he's gone, but the trauma bond is real. Story 30. Gonna have to go with getting sucker punched at a bar in Florida, breaking my jaw, and having it wired shut for 6 weeks. Was I drunk and possibly obnoxious? Maybe. Did I deserve to have my jaw broken in 2 places? No. Crazy. I just read about 2 people who were shot coming home from the bar in the same part of Florida. So, although we all had horrible luck, I always think it could be worse. Story 31. A girl I liked in college wanted to have. It was Halloween weekend on a college campus. When the time came, I got nervous and couldn't get erect. She told campus police that I raped her. I was expelled soon after. She stayed at the school, rushed to sorority, graduated. Story 32. Close friend cheated on his girlfriend with my sister. His girlfriend found out and he blamed it all on me. Said I arranged it all. As if I was my sister's pimp or something. He was so full of, and probably still is. Story 33. My wife ate the center of my pancake the other week. The center. Turned it into a floppy, crappy donut. I got her back real good, but now we're both dug into trenches of opposite sides in this world prank war 3. Story 34. High school ex was an emotionally, mentally, and verbally abusive. Gaslighted me into thinking it was my fault all the time. Told me I was stupid and that no one would ever love me like he did and that no one would put up with my BS. Wasn't I so lucky to have him? The first time we had, it was rape. I didn't know to call it that until years later when we had already broken up, but I had a lot of issues when it came to healthy sexual relationships because of him. He cheated on me with my male best friend's girlfriend and then said it was my fault. Did drugs and blamed it on me being away for college. I am a stronger person for the experience. Happily married with 2 kids now, but it took a long time to heal. Story 35. I got a few. From family, my brother stabbed me in the chest during an argument, and my parents sold a car out from under me that was given to me at 16, my mom's first car, without telling me about it. From a female friend, she took advantage of me, sexual assault, when I was fall-down drunk at a house party. Afterwards told me she just wanted to take my virginity. From a male friend. We got in a minor argument over cars. I'm a mechanic and he was trying to tell me some BS that isn't possible. I told him he didn't know what he was talking about. He took it way too personal and decided to retaliate by calling my wife's job and lying about her. Said she don't have a state license for her line of work. Tried to get her fired, then tried to tell me I should leave her because she was a liar and gonna lose her job and cost us our home and car. I had just started a new job and wasn't making enough to support us. Then threatened to cave her face in over the phone. I haven't spoken to him since, and if I ever see him again, I'll probably end up in prison. Story 36. There's not many comments yet, but based on what I've read, I could say I am a very lucky person. Hugs for everyone with memories you couldn't forget and stories that you never tell. Hope you guys in better place and condition. Story 37. The theme of my entire childhood was, I never mattered to anyone in the slightest the moment I was no longer useful. I was just there to play with as a last resort, get put to work for little to no pay, or use my doormat kindness to the fullest extent. Once I wasn't useful, my friends would drop all contact with me or act very passive-aggressive towards me. Took me a lot longer than I care to admit to finally stop trying to care about these people, especially after a few big life events I wanted to share with them went ignored. Story 38. My dad told me I'm not a good son. He shamed my body, shamed my personality for not being confident, timid, too sensitive, too quiet, and introverted. He said I didn't love him. He said I am lucky to have a father like him. He hurt me so much, which is why I have most of the problems, not mental illnesses, that I have to this day. It's probably not as bad as other people's, though. I'm sure they probably have it worse than I do. I guess take this a bit lightly, as I don't want to offend people who've had it worse than I did. Story 39. My family has taught me cheating is how to get ahead in life. While I can cheat with the best of them, turns out hard work and effort is the way to go. Now I have very little motivation to try at anything and a high expectation. I catch myself ready to quit at the drop of a hat. My mom had me pay people to write papers. My dad taught me how to make things look good and be bad. My grandma taught me how to make a secret secure. My grandpa taught me how to someone over and come out clean. I was a fucking to so many people, and now I'm picking up pieces and just trying to be good. It's the, that sticks with you, that's the worst. Story 40. My closest friend of 12 years convinced everyone at my school I was transphobic so that I'd lose all my friends. Why did they do this? Because I had a fight with my mom and wanted to talk to someone about it. This person always came to me to rant, and I was one of the first people he came out to. However, me ranting to him apparently meant I was an attention, even though no one else was there to hear the convo, so he decided to ruin my reputation by saying I was being transphobic to him. The worst part was our other friends just liked him more than me, so they decided to go along with it, even though they knew he was lying. I graduated with no friends, so that was fun. Story 41. When I was 13, I was forced to go to my cousin's wedding on my birthday, and I was on my period. I had super bad ones that left me wanting to faint, and I wanted to go home. My aunt, who I have lived with and who took us to this wedding, took me to the bathroom and told me how selfish I was, and she noticed I gained weight. I have more about them. Story 42. Woman let her dog off the leash and it ran under my bike, on bike path, at high speed. 3 months in hospital, still doing rehab a year later. Never heard from her. Story 43. When I was a kid, my mom and dad weren't very well off, and one day my great-grandfather got terminally ill. My aunt, who was taking care of him at the time, couldn't afford to put him in a nursing home. My mom, being a licensed nurse, agreed to take care of him if they could get some of the money from his life insurance to pay a 1-year lease for the house they took care of him in. My mom and dad took amazing care of him all the way up until around 2 months in when my great-grandfather passed away. When he died, my great-aunt decided to go back on the deal so she and her husband could move to Florida with their son. My parents already signed the lease, and so, when this happened, we went homeless. We lived in hotels. Until eventually my parents lost custody of me and my sisters, and we've been living with our grandparents ever since. This wasn't told to me until I was 15. I'm 16 now and I still live with my grandparents. Story 44. Nowhere near as bad as most of the comments, but something that has affected me my whole life. I was in senior school around 13-14. A girl asked me to come over as she had a secret. She was one of the class clowns. We got along but weren't friends. She leant over and screamed a really loud, high-pitched scream right in my ear. Can't describe the feeling. It wasn't physical pain, but I felt awful. She skipped away giggling whilst I stood in shock. 20 years later, I still have problems with that ear. Ear infections, struggling to hear, etc., as well as being anxious by people too close to me. Story 45. When I was young, I hung with this kid. At one point we had a sleepover, and he pulled out his penis and told me to do things I didn't want to do. He would ask repeatedly, and then gave in. Because it's just so easy to do as an 8-year-old. Sometimes PTSD will come out of nowhere, and I have to walk away in tears to regain myself. I'm angry at myself for letting me get peer pressured, and I've somehow found it deep in my heart to forgive him. But that doesn't justify his actions. Story 46. My mother died very suddenly when I was 14. Parents had been separated 2 years. My dad flew to town the next day and let me know that about 3 hours after my mom died, he had proposed to his girlfriend he had cheated on my mom with. Story 47. I was 7-year-old when this happened. I'm from India, so back then, I used to go to my friend home to play cricket in most evening. One day, while I'm batting, the ball hit on friend brother face. It was plastic ball. I don't know what to do or say in that situation. But my friend dad took a stone from floor and threw me at my face. I was bleeding, but somehow still remember why did a 35-year-old man throw a stone as revenge. And that make me feel mentally bad for few days. And I've never told to my family. I told them I fell down from bicycle. Sorry for my English, isn't my first language. Story 48. My ex-wife had a long-time affair with an ex-friend of mine. We were almost married 10 years when I found out. The worst part is she kept telling me I was overreacting. I had to put a tracker in her car to find the two in a park at 5 a.m. in the morning. It turned my world upside down. Now I'm just trying to move on and get over the insecurities she helped instill. Story 49. The beginning of my junior year of high school. I had a friend group that I shared a lot of good times with in years past. There were 4 guys, including me, and 3 girls, and we did nearly everything together. Toward the end of the year, they began to cut me off and hang out without me, lying about it, and overall just flat out excluding me. The whole while I was being told that nothing was wrong and I hadn't done anything for this kind of treatment to occur. It was just scheduling conflicts or whatever. Nevertheless, I would continue to make attempts to organize things together, but was always ignored or given a lie. The final straw came after the end of that school year. I had always wanted to organize a float trip for the 7 of us, but there was never much interest from anyone else. Sure enough, a few weeks into summer before my senior year, there were posts from the 6 of them on a float trip. I was so hurt to this point already that I finally cut myself off from continuing to ask and wonder why I was being disposed of. The way they treated me ate away at my mental health through the summer and into my senior year. I'd see some of them in class and they still would attempt to be chummy, but I reciprocated only enough to be cordial. I carried the weight of having my closest friends all up and abandon me with no reason for many years, and I attribute their mistreatment of me to many of the mental health and self-worth issues I still struggle with to this day. I still do see the occasional photo of all them together, and they were back in my hometown for the holidays at the same time as me. But thankfully, I no longer yearn to be included, nor do I expect an apology. They are incapable of seeing any wrongdoing on their part. It took me a bit to realize how narcissistic a good portion of them were, and the others were too timid to speak out against anything. I have a fantastic group of friends around me now that treat me thousands of times better than they ever did. Story 50. My sister had married some deadbeats, but the worst one practically tore the family apart, and the effects are everlasting. Way back in early 2000s, she and her kids convinced my mother to move to their state so that we could be closer. Took a few years to shut down a little farm property, and by mid-2000s we moved. It was great for all of 2 months until we met her new boyfriend. Acted nice the first time we met him, but that ended quickly. He somehow managed to convince my sister that my mother and I were manipulating her and trying to control her life, and she bought into it. He was apparently a crazy fundamentalist Christian, didn't like us Catholics much, and used that to convince my sister of everything, I guess. Suddenly, we're the bad guys, and this guy somehow has the police harassing my mother often for false offenses. Eventually, this guy convinces my sister to move elsewhere and marry him. She sold her house and everything. There's a lot of that happened, but the long and short of it was at some point he gambled away all my sister's money from the home sale, and she eventually moved back to the same state. She divorced and remarried this guy twice. Her children growing up in this time were hot and cold with my mother and I over the years, but always seemed to believe what that man said about us in the end. I'm convinced she'd still be with the guy, but like something out of a crime drama, he was killed in a drug deal gone wrong in another state. We learned he was a CI for the police and a meth head himself. When he died, no one from his own family would claim him. Still don't hear from those family members. But admittedly, it's a lot less drama in our lives. Story 51 claimed I was a peeping Tom, grabbed and squeezed my testicles during a high school class, pretended they thought I was attractive before calling me ugly and laughing. Story 52. Near the end of my failing marriage, our third marriage counselor asked what was standing in the way of things getting better. I said, I needed to understand why, when I'd asked him for something as simple as to say kind words about me, he wouldn't do it. Mind, there had been a point in our marriage when I had begged him to say something good about me, and his response was, I can't. There were so many other issues. His refusal to take on adult responsibilities, either as team or solely by himself, making agreements and repeatedly breaking them. No, but I could not understand why someone who purported to love me and want to stay married to me would refuse to do something that would seem a basic human kindness. It took a lot of time to get him to actually answer, but what came back was, during our marriage, I've always been aware of the power dynamics between us. I see you as strong and me as weak. So, when you ask me to do something and I don't do it, it makes me feel strong to see you get upset and cry. Also, in any relationship, the one who wants it least has the most power. This explained everything in our marriage. Why asking for anything guaranteed it wouldn't happen? Why my attempts to try to make things better only ended up making things worse? It had never, ever occurred to me that someone would think like that, would be so cruel, because I am not a selfish, passive-aggressive sadist. I gave my life to that man, had his children, worked my fucking off for the well-being of our family, shouldered way too much of the load because he simply would not engage, because either I did it or it didn't get done. And this was how he treated me. This was how he valued me and how he valued our marriage. I wasted nearly 25 years of my life with this person that I will never get back. Our shared parenting responsibilities will become much less involved within the next year, and I look forward to the day that I never have to see his loathsome fat face again. I hope he burns in.